Welcome back, friends. In this tutorial, we will launch an EC2 instance. This launched EC2 instance will have a web server installed. We will install the web server on the EC2 instance. In the next section, we will learn how to connect to the running EC2 instance using SSH. In the final section, we will do hands-on with EC2 Security Group. This is a very useful EC2 tutorial for AWS beginners. You will also find this tutorial very valuable if you are preparing for AWS certification. Let's get started and launch EC2 instance. For that, first sign into the AWS Management Console. I'm signed in, and now let's look for EC2. Click here. Now I'm at the EC2 dashboard. Okay? If you click here on the instances, no instances are running. What we'll do now is click on Launch Instances. Here I need to provide name and tag. Let's name it EC2 Tutorial. And if you want, you can also give an additional tag here, though you don't have to. Just a name tag is sufficient. Next, we need to select a base image. This will be the operating system of the launched EC2 instance. As you can see, here is the full list of images. You can browse here to see various AMIs, but for our purpose, the Amazon Linux AMI image is fine. As you can see here, there is a full list of images you can choose from. But here, we also have the option to search for more AMIs. If you click here, you can search for various AMIs. Okay? For example, Marketplace AMIs and Community AMIs. That's where you will learn all these things later on. You should be able to create your own AMI and upload it on AWS. But for this demo purpose, AMI from the Quick Start option is fine because this is eligible for free tier. For this hands-on, I will choose this Linux AMI image. Because this is a free tier eligible, 64-bit architecture is fine. And everything else is okay. Now, we need to choose the instance type. Instance types will differ based on the number of CPUs, the amount of memory they have, and how much they cost. That being said, as you can see, the T2 Micro is selected, and this one is free tier eligible. If we launch one of the T2 micro instances, it will be free to launch for an entire month if we just let it run. As part of the AWS free tier, you can get started with EC2 for free. This includes 750 hours of Linux and Windows T2 micro instances each month for 1 year. To stay within the free tier, it is recommended to use EC2 micro instances. This is what we are using here. Here, if you scroll down, you can see a bunch of instance types here, right? These are various instance types. As I said earlier, these instance types vary based on the number of CPUs, memory, and cost. Okay, now next is the key pair. The key pair you use to connect to your EC2 instances. Okay, this is required if you use SSH to access your instance, and we'll use SSH in this tutorial. That's the reason I will be creating a key pair. Okay. Right now, if you click here, there is no key pair, so you can launch instances without having a key pair. But since I will be using SSH, let's create a new key pair and give this key pair name. Let me give this name EC2 key pair. Okay, and here, the key pair type RSA is fine. This is good. For the private key file format, you can use the .pem format if you have a Mac, Linux, or Windows 10. But if you have a Windows version less than 10, say, for example, 7 or less, you can directly use this option because you can then use it with PuTTY. Okay, it is used to do SSH on Windows. Okay, so remember, anything with less than Windows 10, just PPK or else PEM is okay. Let's click here and create a new key pair. And next is now network settings. Here, I will not change anything. My instance will get a public IP address, and then I will use the public IP address to connect this instance. A security group will be attached to this instance, which will control the traffic to and from this instance. Now, we need to add rules for our security group for this instance, okay? And we can define multiple rules in that security group. So this one is the first one here, which allows traffic from anywhere. Next, we want to allow HTTP traffic from the internet. For this, let's check this box, because that will allow HTTP traffic from the internet. And HTTP is fine. Let it be as it is because this demo server will only use HTTP, not HTTPS. For the storage, the 8 gig option is fine because this is just a demo, and if you want, you can add another volume. Okay, I will remove it. 8 gig is fine. For advanced details, skip it. We can learn it later. Just scroll down, scroll down. The interesting one is the user data section. This is where we pass a script. We pass some commands to the EC2 instance to execute when this instance launches the very first time. Okay, so I'll copy and paste a few lines of command here for this instance, and I will explain what this is. So these are 4 lines here. The first one is telling that this is a bash script. Okay, this installs the HTTP server, and this line creates an index.html page and adds one line, hello world. This is the H1 tag. You already know, and this line will start HTTP daemon. Okay, so essentially this line will start the web server. This part is okay, so now we are good with all this. Let's click here and launch the instance. As you can see, my instance is running, and I want to show you a few things right now. Okay, the first one is that instance name. This is the EC2 tutorial, and there is an instance ID, which is just a unique identifier. Then here is the public IP address associated with this EC2 instance. Okay, then the private IP address, which is associated with this EC2 instance. Okay, the private IP address is essentially used internally when, for example, in this instance, communicating on the AWS private network. Also, we get some information. For example, we have here public DNS corresponding to public IP address and private DNS. Okay, if we scroll down further, we can see that this is the AMI ID that was used. This is the AMI name, launch time, and key pair we used to launch this instance. There are a lot of details we can find about this instance here, right? If we go on security, we can see that this is the security group that launched Wizard1, right? Which was used to launch this instance. And right now, there are 2 rules associated with this security group. The first one is port 80. Port 80 is opened on this EC2 instance, which means anyone can connect on port 80, and then port 22, an SSH port, is also opened. 0.0.0.0 means port 80 can be connected from anywhere. Similarly, port 22 on this machine can be connected from anywhere. Of course, I will not have port 22 open to be connected from anywhere, but this is just for the demo I'm showing here. Similarly, the outbound rule says that it allows all communication outwards, which allows the instance to access the internet. Okay, right now, what is happening is that, again, the same thing here. 0.0.0.0 means all traffic from this instance is allowed to go outside. This means this machine can access the internet. Okay, for storage, we have attached 1 gig volume here. Now, since our web server is running, let's see how our web server looks. We have 2 options. We can just click here, open the address, or copy this IP address and paste that into the browser, right? Let's first click here and see what we get. The important thing is that we need to use HTTP, not HTTPS. The browser defaults to HTTPS. But since we have only opened port 80, let me take the S out. I have taken it out. Now it's only HTTP. Let's hit enter. We got the output. Hello world. We passed that in the user data script when we launched this instance, right? Another way is if I copy this and say, for example, I paste here and enter here. Same thing, right? I got the same output. We saw that our web server is running. That's great. Now, let's explore a few options. We have an EC2 instance that is running. Now, let's see how we can stop this instance. Okay, let's go and stop this instance. This instance is, oh, how can we know that our instance is stopped? So if I go here and if I say refresh right now, it's still coming. It is still stopping. Let this guy be stopped. Okay, so right now it's not showing and running. It is stopped. If I refresh here, right, the site is not reachable. It means the server is stopped. EC2 instance is stopped. What I will do is I'll come here again. I'll just go here and ignore all this because these are all terminated instances. So this is the instance that is stopping, already stopped. I mean, this is stopping. That's okay. I can restart this instance again. For this instance, I will click here. The instance and setting that failed to install is not in state, which can be started. So let's go here again to the dashboard. This is the instance we are trying to start. So let it stop. Once it is stopped, then we will go and start it again. It is failing, so let it stop. As you can see now, the instance is stopped. If I click here and say, okay, start it, now it is in a pending state, and then it will move to a running state, okay? And right now it is still in a pending state. Ignore this terminated one because I was practicing earlier. It is still in a pending state. But if I go and click here now, it is running. Okay, if I come here and click on refresh, remove this from here. Now we have the output. Now the next thing is, what will we do? Right now, port 80 is open. Let me do one thing. This is the security group. Let me take out this security port 80. Okay, I've removed this. I'll click on the edit inbound rule, and what I'll do, I'll take out this HTTP port. Okay, let me take it out. Save the rule. Okay, now if I return here, see what we get here. Okay, so it is spinning. It is spinning, right? It is spinning. So the idea here is that whenever you launch a web server and are testing something like this, for example, if you are testing and this wheel is spinning, spinning and spinning, it means there is a high possibility something is wrong with the security group, right? Port 80 is closed, port 80 is not open. That is why this website is not accessible, right? It keeps on spinning. What will we do? Let's go here and add that port 80 back again. Let me add a rule here. I can select HTTP here, okay? This guy port 80, and let's open it from anywhere, right? Save rule. Okay, so now we're back. If we come here, we got the output, hello world, right? We got it back. This is the whole idea of the security group. Using a security group, we can control inbound and outbound rules, okay? That was one thing. The other thing I also wanted to show you is that, let me stop again. Let me stop this guy. This is the public IP address, okay? This 18.254.192.182. This is, stop it, okay? What I wanted to show you is that when we restart, there is a high possibility that the public IP address might be changed, okay? So let's see what happens. Let's stop, and then I will restart it again. And to see if the public IP address changes. Okay, go here. What happens? Okay, this is not accessible. This has been stopping, but I think it still has not stopped fully. So let's wait a few seconds. Okay, now it is stopped. If I come here to dashboard, and this guy, which is that? So we are working on this guy's EC2 tutorial. Okay, let's say the public IP address. It is gone, right? The private IP is here. Let's restart it again and start the instance. Come here. Earlier, the public IP address was 18.254.192.182. But now, if you notice, the public IP address has changed for this instance. The idea is that when you stop the instance and restart it, you will get a different IP address. However, the private IP address will not change when you stop and start an EC2 instance.
Let me open a new window. I will go to the temp directory. I'll do all the operations, SSH, etc. from this directory. So let me copy the EC2 key pair that I downloaded into this directory. Okay. So as you can see, I got this key pair in this temp directory. Now, we need to change the permission of this key file to ensure that the key is not publicly viewable. You can notice that the owner has read and write permissions, and there are read options for the group and others, right? So we need to change the permission on this key file so it is not publicly viewable. How do you do that? chmod 400 and the file name. Okay? Now, if you do ls, you can see that the read option has gone for other users. So now, this key is not publicly viewable. Okay? Now connect to the launched EC2 instance. You will say SSH-I and the key pair name. Okay. Next, you will give the EC2 user, which is the default name for the Amazon Linux AMI, and then the public IP address of the EC2 instance, and hit the return key. Enter yes. As you can see, I am on the launch the EC2 instance. Okay, I can do ls here. Now, let's go to the directory where the web server is installed. Okay, and right now there is no file. Let me add a test.html file. Let's just put it here. Sorry, I have to do sudo. Okay. Save it. Now let's go and check whether this HTML page is available or not. This is the main URL for the web server we launched. Let me add this test.html to see whether we are getting that HTML file here or not. So as you can see, we got the result of this, which is my test homepage, right? So this is how you will connect to your EC2 instance and make changes. Now the other thing, suppose that you are not on your local machine, right? Mac machine or whichever machine you have configured to have an SSH connection to the launched EC2 instance, right? Then how will you connect to the launched EC2 instance? Well, you can also make an SSH connection directly from this browser. So if you click here on the connect button, the public IP is fine, and the username is EC2 user. Let's click on connect, right? Right now, it is failing because I have set up an inbound SSH connection from my local machine only, which means from my Mac only, right? So that's the reason it is failing. Let me make a change to the inbound connection in the security group attached to the launched EC2 instance. This is the security group. Let me click on the inbound. Let me change here to SSH. Click Edit Inbound Rule, and here, let me change it to Anywhere. I will not recommend changing it to Anywhere. However, sometimes, in one-off cases, you may need it for testing out something urgent if you are unavailable on your local machine and want to make changes remotely, right? So in that condition, you need this. In that case, this option is helpful. Okay, so make a change. You say Save Rules, and now go to Instance, select Instances, and say Connect. All these options are okay. Let's click Connect. And you see I got connected here, right? This is how you will make an SSH connection from the AWS Management Console. Okay.
I think we've covered many important aspects related to launching an EC2 instance in this lecture. We have launched EC2 Instance, and we launched web server in the cloud. We learned how to stop and start an EC2 instance, right? One more thing, let's learn how to terminate an EC2 instance. Let's terminate it. Click here, and it will be terminated. Now let's look at security groups. We can briefly understand security groups by clicking on the Security tab here. For example, we can get an overview of security groups and inbound and outbound rules attached to our instance, okay? But what I will do is access a more detailed page, which is here. Let's click on Security Groups from the left-hand side menu. As you can notice, we have two security groups here in our console so far. The default security group is created by default. We also have this launched Wizard1 security group here, which was created when we created our EC2 instance. This one, right? The security group has an ID, as you can see. This security group has an ID. This security group has an ID. And we can check its inbound rule. For example, for this security group, these are inbound rules. Port 80 and port 22 are allowed on this EC2 instance. If I click here, Edit Inbound Rule, I can see more details. The first inbound rule here is the HTTP rule, which allows connectivity to port 80 from anywhere. The second rule is SSH, which allows connectivity at port 22 from anywhere. Okay? Suppose you need to test this to check how it works. What I will do, I will delete this. This is the first rule, and let's see what happens. Save the rule. What is happening is this launch wizard, which is associated with the instance I'm running. The inbound rule for this security group now only allows connections on port 22. All other ports are closed, right? Let's see the result of deleting port 80 from the inbound rule. If I go to the EC2 instance, and for example, if I get the IP address, this one, or if I just click here, see what we get. I have to remove the S because I've not set up HTTPS. If you notice here, this is spinning. I'm not getting the output from the HTML page here, right? The question is why we are not getting the output and why it is spinning. If you look at the inbound rule of the security group attached to this instance, in the inbound rule, only port 22 is open. All other ports are closed, right? So that's the reason we are not getting the output here. This site can't be reached because port 80 is closed, right? Now let's go here. Add that inbound rule back, okay? Let's add that inbound rule here. Click on the edit inbound rule. Let's add that rule of HTTP, which I can get here. HTTP, port 80, and IP address CIDR block. Let's allow all IP addresses from anywhere and save the rule. And if I click here and hit enter, now you can see that the output hello world is displayed here. This hello world output is because we have allowed port 80 in the inbound rule in the security group attached to this EC2 instance. Because in the security group of this EC2 instance, this security group, there are two ports that are allowed, port 80 and port 22, right? Since we added port 80 back, if I go to my web server, I can see that it is displaying the output of index.html, okay? If you can recall, just a while ago, when port 80 was closed, only port 22 was open. Then, when we checked here, it was just spinning, right? The point to keep in mind is that when you go to a web page and see that the browser is not displaying the output, instead, it is spinning. Then, with regard to the EC2 instance, the issue could be related to the security group. The port is not open, or the port is open but not accessible from the source requesting access. The point to keep in mind is whenever you see a timeout issue on web pages, there is a high chance that there could be a security group related issue. Okay? Another thing I would like to talk about is if we come to a security group. As you can see right now, there are two security groups. However, only one security group is attached to this EC2 instance. Right? Only one security group is attached. However, more than one security group can be attached to an EC2 instance. Let's go to the security group. Similarly, one security group can be associated with more than one EC2 instance. Okay? That's the point. Just to repeat, one security group can be associated with more than one EC2 instance. And conversely, we can attach more than one security group to one EC2 instance, right? So there are 3 points to keep in mind with regards to EC2 security groups. The first one is when you launch an EC2 instance with a web server installed, and if you go to any web page, particularly on the home page, and if you get the spinning wheel running, it means there is a connectivity issue, security group related issue. Check the security group whether port 80 and in the case of HTTPS, port 443 is open or not. Okay? The second point is that you can attach more than one security group to an EC2 instance. The third point is that one security group can be attached to more than one EC2 instance. Okay? That's it for this tutorial. Please keep these 3 points with regard to EC2 security groups. It can be handy in AWS exams and labs.